Coming Out Stories is a short-run podcast exclusive to the Lesbian Talk Show. The goal of this podcast is to share real stories from real people in the LGBTQIA community. Because this is such a personal journey, I ask that if you do comment on these shows, then please do so positively. The more we stand together and embrace our diversity, the stronger we get as a community.
My name is Amy Bright. I have published one book. It is a romantic suspense, I guess is the best way to put it. It was really kind of just an on-the-fly thing because I wanted to have something for the GCLS convention this past year. So I just said, well, I'm going to write something really fast and put it out there. So I did. But I've got a full-length novel that I'm working on that should be out by the end of the year.
What is the title of the romantic suspense?
It's called Breaking Point. It's about two women who meet on vacation in Mexico and they decide to continue their affair once they get back home, long distance. They live about 5 hours from each other, and then there's a best friend who is not happy about the situation, so it gets a little dicey at times.
Okay, cool. And you're here today to talk about your coming out story.
So my coming out story is probably really kind of weird and complicated all at the same time. So I was married. I had married this guy that I met while I was in college. I met him my freshman year. We married my sophomore year, had a kid, and I met this woman online. Nothing romantic. She was just a friend. And one day she says to me, she says, you know, Amy, I think you might consider that you might be a lesbian. And I had been frequenting these chat rooms that were women-only chat rooms. And I didn't realize they were mostly lesbians. I had no idea. I thought they were just women-only because that's just who I wanted to be around. And she posed this to me, and I said, no, I'm really not. And a lot of my objection to this was that I was fairly religious at the time. So there was a lot of needing to reconcile that with my belief system, with the potential that my sexuality wasn't as I perceived it to be. So she says to me, there's a book you should read. So she says, get this book. It's called Is the Homosexual My Neighbor? Just read it. If you come away from that and you don't feel like you might be gay, you're probably not. And I said, okay. So I got the book. I read the book. And then I looked at my husband and I said, you know, I think I'm pretty sure I'm a lesbian. So he says to me, well, I suspect you might should figure that out if we're going to stay married. So, I mean, I had his permission and I started dating and I went out with this girl. So this is where the story gets a little weird. I met a couple of different girls online that I was going to go out with. And one of them I had told that I was married and had a child. The other one, I did not. And it just had never come up. It wasn't like I was keeping it. It just hadn't come up. And I got them confused. So the one that I ended up going out with was the one that didn't know. So when I went out with her and I mentioned this, she's like, you didn't tell me that. And I was like, I didn't, because I really thought I did. Anyway, we ended up having a really nice time. We went out and we talked for hours and hours and hours. I think we stayed at Outback for like 5 hours. I'm sure they were like totally ready to kick us out. She kissed me that night. And that was when I knew 100% for sure that I absolutely was a lesbian. No doubt. First time I'd kissed a woman, and it was definitely, you know, not what I was expecting. So I told my husband, I'm definitely a lesbian. And then I found out 2 weeks later I was pregnant again. Yeah, I had to tell the girl who I had then started dating that I was pregnant. That was not a fun conversation. And as far as my family went, I didn't tell them one way or the other. I just told them that I was divorcing my husband, that we, you know, weren't doing anything. Now, at the same time, I also wasn't hiding that I was dating this woman. She was with me all the time. I'd put pride stickers on my car. I was wearing pride jewelry. But I just wasn't telling anybody. I didn't feel like it was necessary. I had a sister who is not a very nice person. And she told my whole family that, you know, all these rainbow stickers on her car means that she's gay. So that didn't go over real well with my family. I had a sister who gave me Bible tracts for Christmas one year. That was fun. But what I learned from my experience with this first girlfriend that I had is that the world of lesbian dating is extremely small. Very, very small. And this is how I learned this. Remember I told you that I was talking to 2 women, and one I told about my kids and one I didn't? They had never met each other at that time. Stress this. They had not met each other, didn't know each other. Brandy, that was my girlfriend. We'd been together for 6 months, and we were not doing well as a couple, and it was coming to an end. She disappeared for a weekend, and I found out that she was cheating on me with that girl.
Not that cheating is funny, but you're right about the small world thing.
So that was my introduction to what she termed the lesbian incest circle, and the L word called the chart. Just we all know each other. And I find that it is a very, very, very small world.
How did you feel when you came to terms with being gay?
It was really interesting for me because one of the first things that I noticed was when I reflected back on my childhood, especially my early adolescence and teen years, I would develop these really unnatural attachments to women in my life, or girls, sometimes women, sometimes girls. And I just thought, well, I just want to be friends with them. I just want to be close to them. I never attributed it to being a crush. And I often wondered why I didn't have those same feelings about guys. Like, I never really cared about guys. When I met my husband, he was just a really nice guy, and he treated me well. And I was like, this is not bad. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. So that's why I married him, because he was a good friend, and friendship goes a long way. I would have liked to have stayed friends with him, but that did not work out really well once we actually divorced. Which, incidentally, we did not divorce right away. We separated. But then, since gay marriage wasn't legal, I refused to pay for a divorce. I told him when he wanted to pay for a divorce, he could get one, but since it wouldn't benefit me, I wasn't paying for it. So I stayed married to him for like 3 years.
You're listening to The Lesbian Talk Show. TheLesbianTalkShow.com, your hub of podcast information. And your kids, how old are they now?
My oldest is 22 and my youngest is 19.
Did this come as a shock to them?
Well, the second one wasn't born, so he's never known anything else.
Right.
And the other one was so small, I don't think it wasn't relevant. He was really close to my second girlfriend. We lived together for about a year, and he was very close to her. But he was, again, really little when we lived together. He was only 3. Yeah, well, I guess he was about 4 years old. He loved her, but when it ended, it wasn't that big of a deal because, like I said, he was really young. And then I met my wife like 2 years later, and she and I have been together now for 14 years. And
you're happier now that you've sort of discovered your true self?
Oh, yeah. I was happier in general when I came out because, I wouldn't say that I was ever an unhappy person, but definitely there was a drastic difference in the way I felt once I came out. I was certainly happier. Meaning my wife, however, was... Honest to God, I have spent the past 14 years of my life in bliss.
That's wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm exceptionally lucky.
So you're a testament to these non-believers who think there's no way you can not know you're a lesbian and get married to a guy and have kids, because you're a testament that it actually does happen.
Absolutely. We're raised in a heteronormative society. So full disclosure, I'm a sociologist. That's what I'm educated to be, as a sociologist. And we're raised in a heteronormative society. We're not really taught that anything other than heterosexuality is an option. That's how we're all conditioned. So when the option's not on the table for you, you don't consider it. And for me, especially being raised in the American South, even though I was raised in a very progressive family, being raised in the American South, it really isn't an option. People trashed gay people my whole life, even though my parents weren't like that. We actually had lesbian friends, or they had lesbian friends. They were older, obviously. I was a child. But we would spend time at their house. And, I would hear them talking about it because they weren't out. They were a roommate situation, but everybody knew because we're talking about the 1980s. And, I would hear my parents talking about, well, they're lesbians, but they didn't say anything negative. They talked about them in positive terms, how nice they were and all that. So it wasn't like my parents did that. But being in the South, it was rough trying to navigate that, especially with the religious aspect. And my parents weren't real religious, but what happened was they sent me to a private school when I was in middle school because I was struggling really hard. And looking back, one of the reasons I was struggling is because I was gay and I didn't know it. But I was struggling really hard in middle school. So my mom said, you know what? Let's put you in private school and see if that helps. The only private schools in the town that I lived in were Christian schools. For 3 years, I was immersed in fundamentalism. And I don't mean just, typical evangelical Christianity. I'm talking wasn't allowed to wear pants or shorts to school. I had to wear skirts that were below my knee. I had to wear culottes for gym. I mean, it's hardcore fundamentalism. So being immersed in that for 3 years, there was some residual effects, even though my mom eventually pulled me out because it was totally against, her beliefs to raise me that way. There was still certain aspects of it that affected me personally. So I had to reconcile that with my sexuality. And that's where the book came in. The book was really helpful. And I think Becky, that's the woman that recommended that book to me. I think what she recognized was that what was holding me back from recognizing the truth was my religious issues. And that book really pushed me over the edge. It made me see that I could be gay and I wouldn't go to hell for it and it was okay.
Do you think it makes a difference, or it would have made a difference if you were exposed as a kid when you were going through these hormonal shifts, these changes, these feelings, that if you had exposure to lesbian media positively, that you would have maybe recognized something?
I think so, for sure. I think it would have been, so I did watch Ellen when I was younger, in the 90s. But again, by the time that happened, my personality was established. I graduated from high school in 1994. So by the time Ellen was, on TV, I was pretty established in my personality traits. But had I seen that earlier, had I been more exposed to it as a child and seen some positivity, I think it definitely would have impacted me. It's one of the reasons why I want to write lesfic. I could write anything. I have for years written lots of different stuff. But writing lesfic for me is about representation. It's not about, well, that's a great market to be in now. It is a great market to be in right now. Absolutely. It's probably one of the fastest growing markets there is. But that's not what it's about for me. It's about that's where my heart lies, because I want people to see themselves in books and I want them to see themselves on the screen. And I think it's really super important, especially for younger people, to have those images.
I agree with you. I say this quite a lot in my various podcasts and stuff, but I think that leading the charge in pushing lesfic into mainstream is not going to be the romances. It's going to be the suspense books and the thrillers and the books with incidental lesbians where romance is not the main thrust of the story.
And I don't actually disagree with that. My plan is to write. I have a book that I'm working on. It's going to take probably a few years to get out because it's going to be a pretty large book. And I always have multiple works in progress because when I get writer's block, I can just switch to something else. I found that's really what writer's block is. You just don't want to work on this right now. It's not that you can't write usually. It's just you can't write what you need to write. So write something else. That's been my solution to that. So I always have multiple things that I can be working on at any given time. And I've got this one, and it is a romance, but it's not what you would consider a standard romance by any stretch of the imagination. The premise of it is more about human behavior than it is anything else. And it's not strictly about lesbians. It's about women who are straight and women who identify as straight coming to terms with their sexuality, but doing it through different means. I don't want to talk too much about it because, like I said, it's still a work in progress. And what I find is that my characters really do write themselves. What I start out with as the premise for something can totally be different by the time it ends. The book that I published back in June was never meant to be a romantic suspense. It was meant to be a simple contemporary romance. That's all it was supposed to be. That is not where it went. That's why I can't say for sure how things are going to go. Like the one I'm working on now, I'm pretty concrete about where it's going, but it's taken some turns I wasn't expecting. And because I used to work in law enforcement, I think sometimes my books tend to take a little bit of a criminal turn that I don't expect them to take. And that's what happened with Breaking Point. It was just it wasn't even supposed to be titled Breaking Point. There wasn't supposed to be any suspense. It was just supposed to be a simple two women meet. They realize that they're really compatible. They go back home. They have a little interference from somebody who has some jealousy, but nothing, criminal about it. Like I said, that's not where it went. So, I never know.
Amy, where can people find you online if they are thrilled by this and want to connect with you?
I'm always on Facebook. It's Amy Bright. I also have a Facebook author page, which is Amy Bright. I am on Twitter at outlesbian, OUTLSBN. And then I have a website, which is a great website if you're down for just reading some really cute snippets of conversations with my wife, because she's adorable and she says really funny stuff all the time. So what I do is I'll take little snippets of our conversation, usually 3 or 4 lines of conversation, and I make blog posts about them. It's called conversationswithmywife.com.
Nice.
I also do some book reviews on there and a few other things. Promote my own work, obviously, but mostly Conversations with My Wife. Thus the name conversationswithmywife.com.
Okay, cool. I'll add links to the show notes for anybody who's interested. Amy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
We thank our guest for sharing a very personal part of their lives with us and hope that you connected with their journey. You can find our guests online. Check the show notes for links. The Lesbian Talk Show is all about sharing love and connecting with one another, and we hope that these stories help you do that. Because this is such a personal journey, I ask that if you do comment on these shows, then please do so positively. The more we stand together and embrace our diversity, the stronger we get as a community. Please know that you are under no obligation to come out. It is a very personal journey, and only you can know when you are ready and whether or not it is safe to come out. If you enjoy these podcasts, consider becoming a patron of the talk show. The link is in the show notes. I'm Sheena, and this has been Coming Out Stories.